Imagine you're surrounded by cash all day, stacks of it, millions of dollars. You spend 16 hours a day handling banknotes, yet your own pockets are always empty. This was the reality for David Ghantt, an ordinary armored car supervisor for the Loomis Fargo security firm. His job, guarding millions of dollars as they moved between banks. His pay, a meager $8 an hour. How long can a person stare at a mountain of wealth while their own dreams are crushed under the weight of honesty? Well, for David, that day finally came. Welcome back to the Truder Tales channel. This is the incredible true story of the 1997 Loomis Fargo bank heist, where one feed-up man triggered an international manhunt by the FBI. This story was so wild, it inspired the 2016 Hollywood movie, Masterminds. And the craziest part, David Ghantt himself acted in the movie based on his own life, but ironically, he didn't get a single penny for it. David Ghantt was a Gulf War veteran. He'd served his country, and now he was serving a security company, working as a vault supervisor. He was drowning in responsibility, working 75 to 80 hours a week, all for just $8.15 an hour. The routine was soul-crushing. Loneliness and the feeling that he was meant for something more were eating him alive. It was this constant, nagging restlessness that finally pushed his thoughts in a dangerous direction. And just as the idea of breaking bad began to form, a new path opened up, a path named Kelly Campbell. Kelly also worked at Loomis Fargo. She was sharp, bold, and had an air of mystery about her. She and David struck up a friendship, often meeting up after work. Even after Kelly left the company, they stayed in touch. One day, Kelly introduced David to her friend, Steve Chambers. Steve was a small-time crook with big dreams of getting rich quick. The moment Steve learned that David was the vault supervisor at Loomis Fargo, a light bulb went off in his head. A very bad, very expensive light bulb. He saw his golden ticket, a heist, but for the plan to work, he needed David on board. So, Steve and Kelly started working on him. David's resolve was already weak. Steve's proposal was like a gust of wind against a house of cards. At first, David was terrified. He'd never broken a rule in his life. But Steve was persuasive. He painted a picture of a luxurious, worry-free life. It was the perfect storm. David's frustration, Kelly's encouragement, and Steve's greed. Together, they pushed David to a point of no return. And so, the master plan began. Now, let's be clear. Steve was a petty criminal. Kelly had zero experience. And David was a complete rookie. Their plan was so amateurish, any professional thief would have laughed them out of the room. It was simple. On the night of October 4th, 1997, David would stay late, disable the security cameras, grab the tapes, load the company van with as much cash as he could, and drive off. The idea was that David would immediately flee to Mexico with $50,000. Why that specific amount? Because, at the time, that was the maximum you could carry across the border without raising suspicion. Steve would hold on to the rest of the millions. Once the heat died down, David would return, and they'd split the money equally. But wait, do you see the problem? It's a massive, glaring flaw. If David takes all the risk and then runs off with just 50 grand, what incentive does Steve have to ever give him the rest of the money? But David was blinded by the promise of a new life. He didn't even question it. Finally, the night arrived. October 4th, 1997. At 6 p.m., David sent his trainee home. He was now alone in the vault. His heart pounding, he went inside and, just as planned, disabled 2 security cameras and removed the tapes. But, in a crucial mistake, he completely forgot about a third camera, hidden away in a corner. For the next several hours, this forgotten camera would record every single moment of the Loomis Fargo robbery. Oblivious, David started grabbing cash, but this wasn't like his day job. He had to empty the entire vault, all by himself. Most of it was in $20 bills. We're talking over 800,000 individual notes. It took him 2 solid hours to stuff the van. By the time he was done, he had loaded approximately $17.3 million. At that moment, he had no idea he had just pulled off the second largest cash heist in American history. After the van was full, David did a little victory dance right there in the vault. And yes, that dance was caught on camera. The next morning, the other employees showed up for work. They couldn't open the vault. The keys were missing. The police were called. Since David Ghantt was the only person not at the office, he immediately became the prime suspect. When they checked the security footage, their suspicions were confirmed. And David's little happy dance, that was just salt in the wound for the investigators. The footage also showed David repeatedly messaging someone on his pager, proving he wasn't working alone. The hunt for David and his accomplices was on. 2 days later, FBI agents found the abandoned van in a forest. Inside, they found nearly $3 million in cash, likely left behind because it was too heavy and they ran out of time. They also found the 2 CCTV tapes David thought he'd stolen. This meant the thieves were still out there with about $14 million in untraceable, unmarked $20 bills. Meanwhile, just as planned, David was in Mexico with his $50,000, living it up at a luxury beach resort. The FBI plastered David's face on the news, offering a $500,000 reward for any information. They asked the public to report anyone who suddenly seemed to have a lot of new money. The phone lines blew up. They had to set up a special desk just for Loomis Fargo tips. Most calls were duds, but one call got the investigation rolling again. Someone reported that their neighbor was suddenly suspiciously wealthy. This neighbor was none other than Steve Chambers, the mastermind himself. The FBI started secret surveillance. It turned out Steve had zero self-control. He and his wife, Michelle, had bought a huge, expensive house. They were throwing money around, buying a new BMW and other luxury goods. When the FBI checked their bank accounts, they saw huge deposits made right after October 4th. A bank teller even told the FBI that Michelle had come in to deposit bags of $20 bills and had brazenly asked, "How much money can we deposit before you have to report it to the feds?" The FBI was now certain Steve and Michelle were involved, but they held off on making arrests, hoping to find David and the others. The whole case broke wide open just 10 days in. The FBI started tapping Steve's phone. During one call, they heard him mention David Ghantt's name. It was a conversation between Steve and a man named Mike McKinney. And what were they talking about? They were plotting to murder David. Just as the flawed plan predicted, Steve had seen all that money and decided he wanted it all for himself. He was going to have David killed in Mexico. The FBI immediately arrested McKinney, who sang like a canary. He confirmed David was in Mexico and revealed where they had transferred the cash from the van. It was the parking lot of the printing press where Steve worked. He didn't even bother to find a secret spot. Because they had so little time and so much cash, they left the $3 million behind in the van and just parked it in a forest right next to Steve's office. Within 10 days, the FBI basically had the entire crew figured out. But they waited for 5 months, patiently gathering solid evidence. Finally, on March 1st, 1998, David Ghantt was arrested in Mexico. The next day, Steve Chambers, his wife Michelle, and Kelly Campbell were all arrested back in North Carolina. The FBI recovered about 88% of the stolen money. The rest had been spent by Steve on his lavish lifestyle. In the end, Steve Chambers was sentenced to 11 years in prison. David Ghantt got 7 years. And David was also handed a bill for the missing $3 million, money he never even touched. As I mentioned, the film Masterminds was made about his story, and while David was a consultant, he legally couldn't be paid. Any money he earned would go directly toward paying off that massive debt. Today, David Ghantt lives in Florida with his wife and kids. He works as a construction worker and has said that he could work his entire life and never be able to pay off the debt. He's active on social media, using his incredible story to teach others lessons from his mistakes. A wild tale of desperation, greed, and a dance that cost $17 million. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.